Andrea Bear was folding laundry in the living room when she first heard it. The sound made her stop mid-fold, a tiny sock dangling from her hand. Someone was playing the piano, but that couldn't be right. Her husband was at work and her mother-in-law had just left for the grocery store. The only other person in the house was Emily, her 2-year-old daughter. Andrea walked toward the piano, her footsteps quiet on the hardwood floor. There sat Emily, barely tall enough to see over the keys, her tiny fingers pressing down on the black and white notes. But this wasn't random banging. This wasn't the chaotic noise most toddlers make when they discover a musical instrument. Emily was actually playing something. Her little hands moved with purpose, searching for specific sounds, repeating patterns that somehow made sense together. "Sweetheart, what are you doing?" Andrea asked softly, not wanting to startle her daughter. Emily turned around with that beautiful toddler smile, the one that still had a few baby teeth missing. "Playing, Mama," she said simply, as if it were the most obvious thing in the world. Then she turned back to the piano and continued pressing keys, humming along with the notes she created. Andrea stood there watching her daughter for a long time. She wasn't a musician herself. Neither was her husband. Sure, they had a piano in the house because it had been in the family for years, but nobody really played it seriously. It was mostly decorative, occasionally producing choppy versions of Happy Birthday at family gatherings. Yet here was Emily, not even potty-trained yet, making music. Over the next few weeks, Andrea noticed Emily returning to the piano again and again. While other kids her age were obsessed with cartoons or stuffed animals, Emily was drawn to those keys like a magnet. She would climb onto the bench, sometimes needing help because her legs were so short, and then lose herself in the sounds she could create. One afternoon, Andrea's mother was visiting. Grandma Rita had been a music teacher decades ago, though she'd retired long before Emily was born. She was sitting at the kitchen table having coffee when she heard the piano. "Is that a recording?" Rita asked, tilting her head toward the living room. "No, that's Emily," Andrea replied, stirring sugar into her own coffee. Rita's cup stopped halfway to her lips. "That's Emily? Playing right now?" They both walked to the doorway and watched. Emily's back was to them, her little body swaying slightly as she played. Her fingers were finding melodies that shouldn't have been possible for someone so young. There was rhythm in what she played, actual musical phrases that repeated and evolved. "Andrea," Rita whispered, her voice trembling slightly. "That child isn't just playing. She's composing." "What do you mean, composing?" Andrea felt her heart start to beat faster. "She's making up her own music. Listen. That's not Twinkle Twinkle or any children's song. That's coming from her own imagination." The two women stood there in silence, witnessing something neither of them could fully understand. When Emily finally stopped playing and turned around, she found both her mother and grandmother staring at her with tears in their eyes. "Why are you crying?" Emily asked, concerned. "Did I do something bad?" "No, baby," Andrea said, kneeling down to hug her daughter. "You did something beautiful." By the time Emily turned 3, the piano had become her best friend. She would wake up in the morning and head straight to it, still in her pajamas with her hair messy from sleep. She played before breakfast, after lunch, and especially in the evening when the house grew quiet. Her parents started to worry that maybe she was spending too much time at the piano, that she should be outside playing with other kids or doing normal 3-year-old things. But whenever they gently suggested she go play with her toys or watch a show, Emily would look genuinely confused. "But I am playing," she would say. And she was right. To her, the piano wasn't work or practice. It was pure joy. Grandma Rita started bringing notebooks to the house. Whenever Emily would hum a new melody, which seemed to happen almost daily, Rita would quickly write it down in musical notation. She had to be fast because Emily's mind moved like lightning, always jumping to the next musical idea before the previous one was fully explored. "She's composing faster than I can write," Rita told Andrea one day, slightly out of breath from trying to keep up. "I've never seen anything like this. She's 3 years old, and she's creating music that would be impressive coming from someone 10 times her age." Friends and family who visited the Bear household always left amazed. They would arrive skeptical, thinking maybe the parents were exaggerating about their daughter's abilities. Everyone knew that parents could be a bit biased when it came to their kids' talents. But after hearing Emily play, the skepticism vanished. Grown adults would sit on the couch, their mouths slightly open, struggling to believe what their ears were telling them. How is this possible? People would ask, does she have perfect pitch? Did she study with someone? How does she know what to play? Andrea and her husband didn't have good answers. They would just shake their heads and say, we don't know. She just does it. The truth was that Emily couldn't explain it either. When adults asked her how she came up with her music, she would shrug her tiny shoulders and say things like, the music just comes into my head, or, the piano tells me what it wants to sound like. Her explanations were simple because to her it was simple. The music was just there, waiting to come out through her fingers. As Emily approached her 4th birthday, her abilities continued to grow in ways that seemed to defy natural learning curves. She could hear a song once on the radio or television, and then sit down and play it back almost perfectly. Her memory for music was photographic. Once a melody entered her mind, it stayed there forever, filed away in some incredible mental library that she could access whenever she wanted. Her parents knew they needed to find her a proper piano teacher, someone who could help guide and develop her gift. But finding the right teacher proved challenging. The first teacher they contacted took one lesson with Emily and then called Andrea that same evening. Mrs. Bear, the teacher said, her voice filled with emotion, I don't think I'm qualified to teach your daughter. She's already beyond anything I learned in my 20 years of teaching. She needs someone much more experienced than me. She needs a master. This became a pattern. Teachers would come to the house excited to work with a young prodigy. But after 1 or 2 sessions, they would realize that Emily wasn't just talented. She was something else entirely. She wasn't learning piano the way other students learned. She was channeling music from some deep, mysterious place inside herself that even she didn't fully understand. By age 5, Emily had composed over 200 original pieces. Grandma Rita had filled multiple notebooks with Emily's melodies, and they had started recording her performances on video. The tapes showed a little girl who seemed to disappear into the music when she played, her face showing emotions that seemed far too complex for someone so young. Sometimes she played with joy, her whole body bouncing with the rhythm. Other times she played pieces that sounded almost melancholic, as if she were expressing feelings she had never actually experienced in her short life. Local newspapers in Rockford started hearing about Emily. A reporter came to the house to do a story, fully expecting to write a cute piece about a talented kid. But after spending an afternoon with Emily, watching her compose a new piece right there on the spot, the reporter knew this was something much bigger than a local interest story. The article ran with the headline, Piano Prodigy of Rockford. 5-year-old composer stuns music world. The story included photos of Emily at her piano, her feet dangling above the pedals that she was still too small to reach. Within days, the phone started ringing. Other newspapers wanted to do stories. Music organizations wanted Emily to perform. Universities wanted to study her abilities. Andrea and her husband tried to keep Emily's life as normal as possible, despite the growing attention. They made sure she still had playdates with other kids, still went to the park, still did all the things that regular kindergartners did. But there was no denying that Emily was different, and that difference was becoming impossible to hide. One evening, as Andrea tucked Emily into bed, she asked her daughter a question that had been weighing on her mind. Emily, sweetheart, do you ever wish you were like other kids? Do you ever wish the music would just go away so you could be normal? Emily thought about this for a moment, her young face serious in the dim light of her bedroom. Then she smiled. Mama, I am normal. This is just what I do. Other kids are good at running fast or drawing pictures. I'm good at piano. It's just my thing. Her simple wisdom brought tears to Andrea's eyes once again. Emily didn't see her gift as a burden or something that made her strange. She saw it as simply part of who she was, like having brown eyes or liking strawberry ice cream. As Emily drifted off to sleep that night, Andrea stood in the doorway watching her daughter. She knew that their lives were about to change in ways she couldn't predict. Word of Emily's abilities was spreading further each day. Opportunities were emerging that would take them far beyond their quiet life in Rockford. And somewhere in California, a television producer was watching a video of Emily performing, already reaching for the phone to make a call that would change everything. The summer Emily turned 6 was unlike any summer the Bear family had ever experienced. Their quiet life in Rockford had transformed into something that felt like a whirlwind they couldn't quite control. The phone rang constantly. Emails flooded in. Everyone wanted a piece of Emily's extraordinary gift. Andrea sat at the kitchen table one morning, staring at a stack of invitations and requests that had arrived just in the past week. Concert halls wanted Emily to perform. Music festivals wanted her as a featured guest. Television programs wanted to interview her. It was overwhelming but also exciting in a way that made Andrea's heart race with both pride and worry. "We need to be careful," her husband said, reading her thoughts. "She's still just a kid. We can't let this consume her childhood." Andrea nodded, but she also knew that Emily's gift was too special to hide away. The world deserved to hear what their daughter could do. The question was how to share it without losing the joy that made Emily's music so special in the first place. Emily herself seemed completely unbothered by all the attention. She would come home from kindergarten, grab a snack from the kitchen, and head straight to the piano like always. Sometimes she played pieces she had composed months ago. Other times she would close her eyes and let her fingers explore new melodies that no one had ever heard before. One afternoon, a renowned piano instructor from Chicago made the 2-hour drive to Rockford specifically to meet Emily. Professor Chen had taught at prestigious music schools for over 30 years and had worked with some of the most talented young musicians in the country, but even he wasn't prepared for what he witnessed. Emily played for him for nearly an hour, moving seamlessly between her own compositions and classical pieces she had taught herself. Professor Chen sat perfectly still the entire time, his experienced ears catching every nuance, every unexpected harmony, every moment of pure musical genius. When Emily finished and spun around on the piano bench with a bright smile, Professor Chen had tears streaming down his weathered face. "In all my years," he said quietly, "I have never heard anything like this. This child doesn't just play music. She speaks it like a native language. It's as natural to her as breathing." He agreed to work with Emily once a week, making the drive to Rockford every Saturday morning. But their lessons were unlike any traditional piano instruction. Professor Chen quickly realized that Emily didn't need to be taught how to play. Instead, he focused on helping her understand the deeper theory behind music, giving her tools to better express what was already flowing out of her naturally. "She's composing faster than I can keep up with," Professor Chen told Andrea after one lesson. "I've started recording every session because she'll play something absolutely brilliant, and then move on to the next idea before I can even process what I just heard. She's created 3 new complete compositions just during our lesson today. 3. That's more than many professional composers create in a month." By this point, Emily had composed over 350 original pieces. Grandma Rita had filled an entire shelf with notebooks containing Emily's melodies. The family had also started properly recording Emily's performances. Sensing that they were documenting something historically significant, the videos they made showed something remarkable beyond just the music itself. When Emily played, she transformed. Her usual 6-year-old energy and silliness melted away, replaced by a focus and emotional depth that seemed impossible for someone so young. Her face would reflect the mood of the music, sometimes joyful and bright, other times contemplative and serious. She swayed with the rhythm, her whole body becoming part of the performance. One of these videos ended up being shared online by a family friend who thought more people should see Emily's talent. Within 24 hours, the video had thousands of views. Within a week, it had hundreds of thousands. Comments poured in from around the world, people expressing shock, awe, and disbelief at what they were witnessing. "This can't be real," some people wrote. "This must be fake or edited somehow," but it was real. Every note, every composition, every moment of musical brilliance was completely authentic. Emily was the real deal, and the world was finally starting to notice. Local television stations in Illinois started featuring Emily on their morning shows. She would arrive at the studio with her parents, still in her favorite sparkly shoes and usually carrying a stuffed animal, looking like any other kindergartner. But then she would sit at the piano, and magic would happen. News anchors who had interviewed hundreds of guests found themselves genuinely moved by this little girl's performances. During commercial breaks, crew members would gather around to watch, forgetting about their jobs for a few moments to simply experience Emily's music. "How do you do it?" one anchor asked Emily during an interview. "How do you come up with all these beautiful songs?" Emily thought for a moment, her 6-year-old mind trying to find words for something that felt beyond words. "The music just lives in my head," she explained. "It's always there, like thinking about what I want for lunch or what game I want to play. Except instead of thinking about sandwiches, I'm thinking about what notes sound pretty together." Her innocent, matter-of-fact explanations charmed everyone she met. She wasn't arrogant about her abilities. She didn't boast or show off. To Emily, playing the piano and composing music was just what she did, as natural and unremarkable to her as walking or talking. But the adults around her knew better. They understood that they were witnessing something that came along maybe once in a generation. Emily wasn't just gifted. She was a genuine prodigy, someone whose abilities defied normal, developmental timelines and challenged everything we thought we knew about how humans learn and create. Music experts who analyzed Emily's compositions were baffled by their sophistication. She used complex chord progressions that typically took years of study to understand. Her pieces had structure and emotional arcs that showed an intuitive grasp of composition theory. She could play in multiple musical styles, from classical to jazz to contemporary, adapting her approach with ease. The technical skill is impressive, one music professor wrote in an analysis of Emily's work. But what's truly extraordinary is the emotional maturity in her compositions. She's expressing feelings and ideas that shouldn't be accessible to a 6-year-old mind. It's as if she has an old soul speaking through young fingers. As word of Emily's abilities spread further, the requests became bigger and more prestigious. Symphony orchestras wanted her to perform with them. Music conservatories wanted to study her development. Documentary filmmakers wanted to capture her story. Book publishers wanted to write about her journey. Andrea and her husband had to become selective, turning down opportunities that felt too commercial or exploitative. They created rules to protect Emily's well-being. She could only perform when she wanted to, never under pressure. She had to maintain a normal school schedule and keep up with her friends. The piano had to remain something she loved, not something that felt like work or obligation. Emily seemed to appreciate these boundaries even at her young age. She loved playing for people and sharing her music, but she also loved being a regular kid. She liked riding her bike, playing at the park, and having sleepovers with her school friends. The piano was a huge part of her life, but it wasn't her entire life. One evening, during a particularly busy week filled with interviews and performances, Emily came to her mother with a serious expression on her little face. "Mama," she said, "can we have a quiet day tomorrow? Just us, no piano people, no cameras, no questions." Andrea felt her heart squeeze. She pulled Emily into a hug. "Of course, sweetheart. I'm sorry if this has all been too much." Emily shook her head against her mother's shoulder. "It's not too much. I like sharing my music. I just miss regular days sometimes." That conversation reminded Andrea and her husband of what mattered most. Fame and opportunity were exciting, but Emily's happiness and childhood were precious and irreplaceable. They recommitted themselves to keeping balance in her life, even as the world's interest in their daughter continued to grow. The growing attention also brought unexpected challenges. Some people were jealous or skeptical. Online commenters sometimes left cruel messages, suggesting that Emily's parents were forcing her to practice for hours every day, or that her abilities were somehow fake or exaggerated. These comments hurt, even though Andrea knew they weren't true. The reality was that Emily practiced because she wanted to, often having to be called away from the piano for dinner or bedtime. Her gift wasn't the result of intense pressure or rigid training schedules. It was simply who she was, a natural expression of her unique mind and soul. As Emily's 6th birthday approached, the family reflected on how much their lives had changed. 3 years ago, they were just a normal family in Rockford. Now they were fielding calls from people around the world, managing a schedule that would exhaust most adults, and watching their daughter become famous for something she considered as normal as breathing. But through it all, Emily remained remarkably grounded. She still giggled at silly jokes, still needed help tying her shoes, still had a favorite blanket she slept with every night. She was extraordinary and ordinary at the same time, a living reminder that genius doesn't erase humanity. Andrea's hand trembled as she held the phone to her ear. She had to ask the producer to repeat herself because surely she hadn't heard correctly. The Ellen DeGeneres Show wanted Emily to be a guest? The actual Ellen DeGeneres Show that millions of people watched every single day? "Yes, that's right," the producer said warmly. "We came across videos of Emily performing, and Ellen was absolutely blown away. We've featured talented kids before, but there's something really special about your daughter. Ellen would love to have her on the show." After hanging up, Andrea just stood in the kitchen for a long moment, trying to process what had just happened. Through the doorway, she could see Emily at the piano, her little legs swinging as she played, completely unaware that her life was about to change in ways none of them could imagine. "Emily, sweetie, can you come here for a minute?" Andrea called, trying to keep her voice steady. Emily hopped down from the piano bench and skipped into the kitchen, her hair bouncing with each step. "What's up, Mama?" "How would you feel about going on a big television show and playing piano for lots and lots of people?" Emily's eyes got wide. "Like on TV? Like the shows we watch?" "Yes, exactly like that. There's a show called Ellen, and the lady who hosts it, her name is Ellen too, she wants you to come play piano on her show." Emily thought about this for exactly 3 seconds before breaking into a huge grin. "That sounds fun. Can I play my new song? The one I made up yesterday?" Andrea laughed, pulling her daughter into a hug. Of course, Emily's main concern was which piece she would get to perform. While most people would be nervous about appearing on national television, Emily just saw it as another chance to share her music. The next few weeks were a blur of preparation and excitement. The show's producers called several times to discuss details. They wanted to know which pieces Emily would perform, how long she'd been playing, what questions Ellen might ask during the interview portion. They were thorough but kind, clearly experienced at working with young guests. Emily's father took time off work so the whole family could make the trip to Los Angeles. None of them had been to California before. For Emily, it felt like a grand adventure. She looked at picture books about Los Angeles, fascinated by the palm trees and beaches that looked nothing like Illinois. "Will we see movie stars?" she asked one night at dinner. "Maybe," her dad replied. "Los Angeles is where a lot of movies and TV shows are made. You might see some famous people." "Will they want my autograph?" Emily asked innocently. Her parents exchanged glances and smiled. Their daughter had no concept of her own growing fame. To her, famous people were the actors on television and the singers on the radio. She didn't understand that she was becoming famous herself. Grandma Rita helped Emily pick out an outfit for the show. They spent an afternoon at the mall, looking for something that was fancy enough for television but still comfortable and kid-friendly. Emily wanted to be able to move freely when she played, so they chose a pretty dress that wasn't too fussy. "You're going to do great," Rita told her granddaughter as they walked through the mall. "Just be yourself, play the way you always do, and everyone is going to love you." "I'm not nervous," Emily said truthfully. "Playing piano is easy for me," Rita smiled. If only Emily understood that what she found easy, most people found impossible. The night before they left for Los Angeles, Emily had trouble sleeping. Not from nerves, but from excitement. She kept thinking about the airplane ride, which would be her first time flying. She wondered what the ocean looked like in real life. She thought about meeting Ellen, who seemed nice on her show. Finally, around midnight, Andrea heard small footsteps padding down the hallway. Emily appeared in her parents' bedroom doorway, clutching her favorite stuffed rabbit. "I can't sleep," she whispered. "My brain won't turn off." Andrea lifted the covers, and Emily climbed into bed between her parents, snuggling close. "Try thinking about your music," Andrea suggested softly. "Think about the song you're going to play tomorrow?" Emily closed her eyes, and within minutes her breathing became slow and steady. She was thinking about music just like her mother suggested, and the melodies in her head gently carried her into sleep. The next morning started early. They had to be at the airport before sunrise to catch their flight. Emily was practically bouncing with energy as they checked their luggage and went through security. Everything was new and exciting to her young eyes. The airport shops, the coffee stands, the screens showing departing flights, the huge windows where you could watch planes taking off and landing. When they finally boarded the plane and Emily got to look out the window as they took off, her face pressed against the glass, she let out a gasp of pure wonder. "Mama, look! We're flying! We're actually flying like birds." The businessman sitting across the aisle smiled at Emily's enthusiasm. If he recognized her from the videos that had been circulating online, he didn't say anything. For this flight, Emily was just an excited little girl experiencing the magic of her first airplane ride. During the flight, Emily pulled out a small notebook and started drawing musical notes. She was working on a new composition, one she might not play on the show, but that was living in her mind and needed to come out. The flight attendant noticed and asked what she was doing. "I'm writing music," Emily explained, showing her the page filled with notes and symbols. "You can write music? How old are you?" "I'm 6. And yes, I write lots of music. I have hundreds of songs." The flight attendant looked at Emily's parents for confirmation. Andrea nodded and explained they were heading to Los Angeles for the Ellen show. The flight attendant's eyes went wide, and soon several crew members found excuses to walk past Emily's seat, curious about this young musical prodigy. When the plane landed in Los Angeles and they stepped outside into the California sunshine, Emily stopped in her tracks. The air felt different here, warmer, drier, filled with an energy she couldn't quite name. Palm trees lined the roads leading away from the airport, so different from the trees back home in Illinois. Everything looks like it's from a movie, Emily said, her nose pressed against the car window as they drove to their hotel. The Ellen show had arranged for a car service to pick them up. The driver was chatty and friendly, pointing out landmarks as they drove. That's where they film a bunch of game shows, he'd say, or that restaurant is owned by a famous chef who was on TV. Their hotel was nice, nicer than anywhere the family usually stayed. Emily was delighted to discover that their room had 2 beds, which meant she got her own bed instead of sharing with her parents. She jumped on it a few times before her father gently reminded her that they needed to settle in and rest before the big day tomorrow. That evening, they went to dinner at a restaurant near the hotel. Emily ordered chicken fingers, which she would have ordered anywhere in the world. Some things about her were still completely normal 6-year-old kid, and that made her parents smile. "Are you getting nervous at all?" her dad asked as they ate. Emily shook her head, her mouth full of French fries. After swallowing, she said, "Why would I be nervous? I play piano every day. This is just playing piano in a different place." Her simple logic was flawless. To Emily, the setting didn't matter. A piano was a piano and music was music. She couldn't understand why adults made such a big deal about where you performed or who was watching. That night, as Andrea tucked Emily into her hotel bed, she asked a question that had been on her mind. "Emily, honey, do you understand that tomorrow lots and lots of people are going to see you play? Not just the people in the studio, but people watching at home all across the country?" Emily nodded. "Like how we watch Ellen at Grandma's house sometimes?" "Exactly like that. Except tomorrow, you'll be the one on the TV screen. People in their homes will be watching you play piano." Emily thought about this, her young mind trying to comprehend the scale. "So like people in Texas will see me? And New York? And all those other states we learned about in school?" "Yes, all of them. And maybe even people in other countries." Emily's eyes got wide for a moment, but then she smiled. "Good. Then lots of people will get to hear my music. That makes me happy." And with that simple statement, she rolled over and went to sleep, unburdened by the pressure and expectations that would have paralyzed most adults. To Emily, this was just an opportunity to share what she loved most with more people. Nothing scary, nothing stressful. Just music. Andrea stood in the doorway watching her daughter sleep for a long time. Tomorrow, Emily would walk onto one of the biggest stages of her young life. Tomorrow, millions of people would discover what the Bear family had known for years. Tomorrow, everything would change. But tonight, Emily was just a little girl sleeping peacefully in a hotel bed, dreaming of music and palm trees and all the adventures still to come. The morning of the Ellen show taping, Emily woke up before her alarm. Sunlight streamed through the hotel curtains, and she could hear the distant sounds of Los Angeles traffic already humming below. She sat up in bed, her hair messy from sleep, and felt a flutter of excitement in her stomach that had nothing to do with nervousness. Today was the day she'd get to play piano on real television. Today was the day she'd meet Ellen, who seemed so nice and funny on TV. Today was going to be special. "Good morning, superstar," her dad said, already awake and checking his phone. "How'd you sleep?" "Good. Can we have breakfast?" "I'm hungry." Even on the biggest day of her young life, Emily's priorities remained wonderfully normal. They ate breakfast in the hotel restaurant. Emily had pancakes with strawberries and whipped cream, carefully cutting them into small pieces while her parents went over the schedule for the day. A car would pick them up at 10. They'd arrive at the Warner Brothers studio around 10:30. Soundcheck would happen around 11. The actual taping would begin at 2 in the afternoon. Emily nodded along while eating her pancakes, not really understanding what soundcheck meant or why everything had such specific times. She just knew that eventually she'd get to play piano, and that was the part she cared about. The car that picked them up was even fancier than yesterday's airport car. Emily loved the leather seats and the way the windows were tinted dark. She felt like a movie star already, and they hadn't even arrived at the studio yet. As they drove through Los Angeles, her father pointed out the Warner Brothers water tower in the distance. "That's where we're going," he said. "That's where they make the Ellen show." Emily pressed her face against the window, watching as they got closer. The studio lot was huge, much bigger than she'd imagined. There were multiple buildings, parking lots, and people walking around with headsets and clipboards looking very busy and important. Security at the gate checked their names on a list and waved them through. A production assistant named Lisa met them at the door, a young woman with a bright smile and a tablet tucked under her arm. "You must be Emily," Lisa said, crouching down to Emily's level. "I'm so excited to meet you. I watched all your videos and you're incredible." Emily smiled shyly. "Thank you. Are we going to see Ellen now?" "Soon," Lisa promised. "First, let me show you around a little bit." She led the family through a maze of corridors. The walls were covered with posters from different shows that were filmed at the studio. Other people passed them in the hallways, some in normal clothes, others in costumes or fancy makeup. Emily's head swiveled back and forth, trying to take everything in. "This place is like a whole city inside," Emily whispered to her mother. They passed windows that looked into various studios where sets were built. Emily saw a living room that looked real but wasn't, a kitchen that was just for filming, and a talk show set that made her gasp. "Is that Ellen's stage?" she asked. "That's a different show," Lisa explained. "Ellen's stage is even better. You'll see it soon." Finally, they arrived at a dressing room with Emily's name on the door, an actual sign that said Emily Bear Guest in professional lettering. Emily touched the sign gently as if making sure it was real. Inside, the dressing room was surprisingly large. There was a couch, a mirror surrounded by lights, a small refrigerator stocked with drinks and snacks, and in the corner, just for Emily, a keyboard had been set up so she could warm up whenever she wanted. "This is all for me?" Emily asked, her eyes wide. "All for you," Lisa confirmed. "You're our special guest today. The keyboard is here if you want to practice and help yourself to any snacks or drinks. The bathroom is through that door. I'll be back in about 30 minutes to take you to sound check, okay?" After Lisa left, Emily immediately went to the keyboard. Her fingers found the keys like greeting old friends. She started playing softly, just warming up, getting comfortable with how these particular keys felt under her fingers. Every piano and keyboard was slightly different, and Emily's sensitive ears could pick up on even small variations in tone. Her parents sat on the couch, watching their daughter do what she did best. They could see her relaxing as she played, the unfamiliar environment becoming less strange as music filled the space. "She's going to be amazing," Emily's father said quietly. "She always is," Andrea replied, though her own hands were shaking slightly with nervous energy that Emily didn't seem to feel. About 20 minutes later, there was a knock on the door. But instead of Lisa returning, a familiar face peeked into the room. It was Ellen herself, casually dressed in jeans and a button-up shirt, her signature friendly smile lighting up her face. "I heard piano playing and figured this must be Emily's room," Ellen said, walking in. "I wanted to say hi before we do the show." Emily stopped playing and spun around on the keyboard bench. For a moment, she just stared, recognizing Ellen from television but processing the surreal experience of seeing her in person. "Hi," Emily said softly, suddenly a bit shy. Ellen walked over and crouched down by the keyboard just like Lisa had done earlier. "Hi, Emily, I'm Ellen. I'm so glad you came all the way from Illinois to be on the show." "You're really pretty in real life," Emily blurted out, then looked embarrassed. Ellen laughed warmly. "Thank you, sweetheart. And you're even more adorable than in the videos. I watched all of them, you know." "Your music is absolutely beautiful." "How long have you been playing piano?" "Since I was really little," Emily said, relaxing a bit. Ellen's kindness was making her feel comfortable. "Like 2 or 3 years old, I think. I don't really remember not playing." "And you write all your own music too?" Emily nodded enthusiastically. "I have so many songs in my head. Sometimes I have to play them really fast to get them all out before I forget them." Ellen smiled at Emily's parents. "She's wonderful. Truly special. I think our audience is going to fall in love with her." They chatted for a few more minutes, Ellen asking Emily about her favorite foods, her school, and what she liked to do when she wasn't playing piano. Emily answered honestly, telling Ellen about her stuffed rabbit collection and how she liked to ride bikes with her friends. "Well, I'll let you get ready," Ellen said, standing up. "But I'm really looking forward to hearing you play." Are you nervous at all? Emily shook her head. No, playing piano is my favorite thing. It's not scary. Good, Ellen said. Just play the way you always do, and it's going to be perfect. I'll see you out there, okay? After Ellen left, Emily turned to her parents with a huge smile. She's so nice. And she really watched my videos. Everyone who sees you play becomes a fan, her mother said, giving Emily a hug. Sound check came next. Lisa returned and led them through more corridors until they reached the actual Ellen show stage. Emily gasped when she saw it. The colorful set looked exactly like it did on TV, but somehow more real and more magical at the same time. The studio audience seats were empty now, but Emily could imagine them filled with people. And there, in the center of it all, was a beautiful grand piano. A real one, not a keyboard. Its black surface gleamed under the studio lights. That's for you, Lisa said. Want to try it out? Emily didn't need to be asked twice. She practically ran to the piano, climbing onto the bench with help from a nearby stagehand. Her feet dangled well above the pedals, so they brought out a special booster that would allow her to reach them if she needed to. The moment Emily's fingers touched the keys, something magical happened. All the strangeness of the studio, all the unfamiliar equipment and lights and cameras, it all faded away. There was just Emily and the piano and the music. She played through the piece she'd chosen to perform, a composition of her own that she'd titled Dreams. The sound technicians and camera operators, who had been chatting and working, gradually fell silent. Everyone stopped what they were doing to listen. When she finished, there was a moment of absolute quiet, and then everyone in the studio burst into spontaneous applause. The director, a man who had been working in television for decades, wiped his eyes and told his assistant, "This is going to be something special." They did a few technical adjustments, making sure the piano sounded perfect through the microphones and that the camera angles would capture Emily properly. She stayed at the piano the whole time, occasionally playing little bits of melodies, completely comfortable in this environment that would intimidate most people. After sound check, they returned to the dressing room to wait until showtime. Emily ate some fruit from the snack basket and played more on the keyboard. Her parents tried to stay calm, but they were definitely more nervous than their daughter. Finally, it was time. Lisa came to get them, and they made their way back to the stage area. The studio audience was filing in now, excited conversation filling the air. Emily peeked out from backstage and saw hundreds of people taking their seats. "That's a lot of people," she said, but not with fear, more like observation. "They're all here to see the show," Lisa explained. "And they're going to love you." The warm-up comedian came out and got the audience excited. Music played. The energy in the studio built and built. Emily stood in the wings holding her mother's hand, watching everything with curious eyes. And then she heard it. Ellen's voice booming through the speakers. "Our next guest is only 6 years old, but she's already composed over 350 original piano pieces." Emily walked onto the stage and was immediately hit by a wave of applause and bright lights. The audience was clapping so loud that she could feel it vibrating through the floor. For a moment, just a brief moment, she felt a flutter in her stomach that might have been the beginning of nerves. But then she saw Ellen standing near the piano, smiling and clapping along with everyone else, and that warm, friendly face made everything feel okay. Ellen walked over and gave Emily a gentle high five, then guided her toward the famous purple chairs where all of Ellen's guests sat for interviews. Emily climbed up onto the chair, her legs dangling well above the floor. She looked so small sitting there, so young, and the audience let out a collective awe at the sight. "Emily, welcome to the show," Ellen said, settling into her own chair. "How are you feeling?" "Good," Emily said, her voice clear and confident despite the hundreds of people watching her. "This is really fun. Your studio is so cool. Have you ever been on a TV show before?" "Just on the news back home a couple times. But this is way bigger." Emily looked around at the cameras and the audience with genuine wonder in her eyes. Ellen laughed. "Yes, this is definitely bigger. So I heard you started playing piano when you were only 2 years old. Is that true?" Emily nodded. "I don't really remember starting. It feels like I've always played. My mom says I just went to the piano one day and started playing, and I never stopped. And you write your own music too, right? How many songs have you written?" Emily had to think about this. I think it's more than 350 now. Maybe close to 400. I write new songs all the time, so I kinda lose count. The audience gasped. Ellen's eyes went wide. 400 songs? Emily, some musicians don't write 400 songs in their entire lifetime, and you're 6 years old. Emily just shrugged, not quite understanding why this was so impressive. Music just comes into my head. I have to play it or write it down, or else I might forget it. Where do you think the music comes from? Ellen asked, genuinely curious. This made Emily think hard. She scrunched up her face in concentration, trying to put into words something she'd never really questioned before. I don't know exactly. It's like, you know how you can smell cookies baking and you just know it's cookies? The music is kind of like that. It's just there, in my head, and I just know what it's supposed to sound like. Ellen nodded, clearly touched by Emily's innocent explanation. That's beautiful. And I heard you played at Carnegie Hall last month. Yeah. Emily's face lit up. That was really cool. The piano there sounded amazing. Different pianos sound different, you know. Some sound bright and happy, and some sound more serious. I like trying different pianos. Well, we have a beautiful piano here for you today. Would you like to play something for us? Yes, please, Emily said enthusiastically, already starting to slide down from the chair. Ellen helped her down and walked with her to the piano. The camera followed them, capturing Emily's small figure next to the grand piano that seemed enormous in comparison. A stagehand brought out the special booster for the pedals, and Emily climbed onto the bench. She took a moment to settle herself, to find the right position, to let her fingers rest on the keys and feel their weight and texture. The studio had gone completely quiet. You could have heard a pin drop. Hundreds of people, cameras, bright lights, Ellen herself standing just a few feet away, and none of it seemed to affect Emily. She was in her own world now, a world of music. Then she began to play. The first notes floated out from the piano, soft and gentle like the beginning of a dream. This was Dreams, the piece she had composed just a few months ago. It started slowly, almost like a lullaby, and then gradually built in complexity and emotion. Emily's whole body moved with the music. She swayed slightly on the bench, leaned into the dramatic moments, pulled back during the softer passages. Her face showed the emotion of the piece, sometimes peaceful, sometimes intense, completely absorbed in what she was creating. In the audience, people sat frozen, barely breathing. Some had tears already forming in their eyes. This wasn't just a cute kid playing piano. This was real artistry, real genius, real music that touched something deep inside everyone who heard it. The melody soared and dipped, raced and slowed, telling a story without words. Emily's fingers moved across the keys with impossible precision. There wasn't a single mistake, not a single hesitation. She knew every note, every phrase, every emotion she wanted to convey because this music had come from inside her own imagination. Backstage, Andrea was crying openly. Her husband had his arm around her, and he was tearing up too. They had heard Emily play hundreds of times, but somehow, seeing her on this stage, sharing her gift with the world like this, it felt different. It felt monumental. The piece built toward its climax, Emily's small hands creating huge, rich chords that filled the entire studio. And then, just as beautifully as it had begun, the music softened again, returning to that gentle, dreamy quality, before ending on one final, perfect note that seemed to hang in the air even after the sound had faded. For a moment, nobody moved. The studio was in complete silence as everyone processed what they had just witnessed. Then the applause erupted like thunder. The entire audience was on their feet, clapping and cheering. Some people were openly weeping. Others were just shaking their heads in disbelief. Ellen was clapping so hard her hands had to hurt, her own eyes shining with tears. Emily turned around on the piano bench with a huge smile, genuinely happy that people had enjoyed her music. She didn't understand that what she'd just done was extraordinary. To her, she'd simply played a piece she liked the way she always did. Ellen walked over and pulled Emily into a hug. When she pulled back, Emily could see that Ellen was crying too. Emily, that was— I don't even have words for what that was, Ellen said, her voice thick with emotion. That was one of the most beautiful things I've ever heard. Emily beamed. Thank you. Did you really like it? Like it? Emily, that was incredible. How did you come up with that piece? They walked back to the chairs and Emily settled back into her seat, kicking her legs happily. I was thinking about what dreams feel like. Sometimes dreams are nice and calm, and sometimes they get exciting and a little bit scary, and then they get calm again. So I tried to make the music sound like that. Ellen just stared at her for a moment. You're 6 years old and you're thinking about things like that? About how to express feelings through music? Well, yeah, Emily said simply. That's what music is for, right? To show feelings. The audience laughed warmly. Charmed by her matter-of-fact wisdom, Ellen continued the interview, asking Emily about her favorite subjects in school, art and music. What she wanted to be when she grew up. She didn't know yet, but definitely something with music. And whether she ever got tired of playing piano, never. Throughout the conversation, Emily was completely natural and unguarded. She made jokes that made everyone laugh. She talked about her stuffed rabbit collection with the same enthusiasm she talked about composing. She was simultaneously an extraordinary genius and a totally normal 6-year-old kid, and that combination was absolutely captivating. During a commercial break, Ellen leaned over to Emily and said something the cameras didn't pick up. You know what? You're going to do amazing things in your life. You're so special. Emily smiled. You're special too, Ellen. You're really nice. When they came back from commercial, Ellen had a surprise. Emily, we wanted to give you something to say thank you for being on our show today. She gestured to someone off stage, and 2 crew members brought out a beautiful electronic keyboard, much fancier than the one Emily had at home. Emily's eyes went huge. Is that for me? It's all yours, Ellen said. So you can keep making beautiful music. Emily jumped down from her chair and ran to the keyboard, examining it with the careful attention of someone who truly understood and appreciated musical instruments. She pressed a few keys, listened to the tone, and broke into a huge grin. Thank you so much. This is the best present ever. She ran back and gave Ellen another hug, this one initiated by Emily herself, completely spontaneous and genuine. The audience was eating it up. Everyone in that studio had fallen completely in love with Emily Bear. She was talented beyond measure, but more than that, she was authentic, kind, and full of joy. She made you want to believe in magic again, to believe that extraordinary things were possible. As the segment wrapped up and Emily walked off stage, waving to the audience who was still giving her a standing ovation, nobody in that studio knew they had just witnessed television history, but they had all felt something special, something rare, something they would remember for the rest of their lives. Backstage, Emily ran into her mother's arms. Mama, did you see? Ellen gave me a keyboard, and everyone liked my song. Andrea held her daughter tight, overwhelmed with pride and love and gratitude that she got to be the mother of this incredible little girl. You were perfect, sweetheart. Absolutely perfect, and she was. Emily had been completely authentically herself, and in doing so, she had captured the hearts of everyone watching. After the taping finished, Emily and her family were guided back to the dressing room. The energy in the air felt electric. Everyone they passed in the hallways congratulating Emily or telling her how amazing she was. Production assistants high-fived her. Camera operators gave her thumbs up. Even the security guard at the stage door stopped to shake her hand. Back in the dressing room, Emily went straight to the keyboard Ellen had given her, testing out all its different features and sounds. She was delighted to discover it had different instrument sounds programmed in. Not just piano, but strings, flutes, drums, and dozens of other options. Listen, Mama, she called out, playing a melody with a sound that mimicked a full orchestra. It's like I have a whole band with me. Andrea and her husband sat on the couch, still processing everything that had just happened. They held hands tightly, both of them feeling the weight of the moment. Their daughter had just performed on national television, and based on the reaction in that studio, something significant had just occurred. There was a knock on the door, and Ellen poked her head in one more time. Mind if I come in for a minute? Of course, Andrea said, standing up quickly. Ellen walked in and crouched down by Emily at the keyboard. I wanted to tell you again how special today was. You have a real gift, Emily, a gift that not many people have. Emily looked up from the keyboard. Do you think people at home liked my music too? Not just the people in the studio? Oh, sweetheart, Ellen said with a warm smile. I think people everywhere are going to love your music. I think after today a lot more people are going to know your name. Emily thought about this. That's good, I guess. Then more people can hear my songs. Ellen laughed softly at her pure, uncomplicated view of fame. To Emily, being known simply meant more people would hear her music. Nothing more complex than that. After saying goodbye to Ellen and the crew, the family headed back to their hotel. Emily chattered the whole way, excitedly replaying every moment of the day. She talked about the piano, about meeting Ellen, about the audience clapping, about her new keyboard. Her parents let her talk, enjoying her happiness and enthusiasm. That evening, they had dinner at a nice restaurant to celebrate. Emily ordered spaghetti and spent the meal telling them about all the different sounds her new keyboard could make, and which ones she wanted to use for future compositions. "Can we call Grandma Rita when we get back to the hotel?" Emily asked. "I want to tell her about everything." "Of course," her father said. "She's probably been waiting by the phone all day." Back at the hotel, they called Grandma Rita, who answered on the first ring. Emily excitedly recounted the entire day while her grandmother listened, occasionally gasping or laughing or saying, "That's wonderful, sweetheart." After Emily went to bed that night, exhausted from the long, exciting day, Andrea and her husband stayed up talking quietly on the hotel balcony. "Everything is about to change, isn't it?" Andrea said. Her husband nodded. "I think so. Once that episode airs, the whole country is going to know about Emily." "Are we ready for that?" "I don't know," he admitted. "But we'll figure it out. We'll protect her and keep her grounded. No matter what happens, she's still just our little girl who happens to have an extraordinary gift." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, looking out at the Los Angeles skyline, both wondering what the future held for their remarkable daughter. The family flew back to Rockford the next day. Emily slept for most of the flight, worn out from all the excitement. When they got home, everything looked exactly the same, but somehow it all felt different. They knew that in a few days, when the Ellen episode aired, their quiet life would never quite be the same again. The episode was scheduled to air on a Thursday afternoon. The Ellen Show's social media team had been building anticipation, posting short clips and teasers about this 6-year-old piano genius who would be on the show. The clips alone were getting thousands of shares and comments. On Thursday, Andrea decided to have a small viewing party at their house. She invited Grandma Rita, a few close family members, and a couple of Emily's teachers from school. Emily herself was excited, but also treating it like any normal day. She went to school in the morning, came home, had a snack, and only as the showtime approached did she start to get really excited about seeing herself on TV. Everyone gathered in the living room. Andrea had made snacks and set out drinks. Emily sat on the floor in front of the TV, still in her school clothes, munching on cookies and chatting with her grandmother. When the show started and Emily's segment began, the room fell completely silent. Everyone watched as Emily walked onto that stage, so small and brave. They watched her talk to Ellen with such natural confidence, and then they watched her perform. Even though everyone in that room had heard Emily play countless times, seeing her on television, performing for Ellen's massive audience, it hit differently. Andrea cried again. Grandma Rita cried. Even Emily's usually stoic father got misty-eyed. Emily herself watched with fascination, occasionally commenting, "Oh, I remember this part," or, "Look, that's when Ellen gave me the keyboard." She seemed more interested in the experience of seeing herself on TV than in being self-conscious about how she looked or sounded. When the segment ended, everyone in the room erupted in applause, just like the studio audience had. Emily stood up and took a little bow, grinning from ear to ear. But the real impact of the episode became clear in the hours and days that followed. Andrea's phone started ringing almost immediately after the show ended. Friends calling to say they'd seen it. Neighbors stopping by to congratulate Emily. Local news stations wanting to do follow-up stories. The next morning, when Andrea checked her email, there were hundreds of messages. Record labels wanting to sign Emily. Concert venues wanting to book her. Producers wanting to make documentaries about her. Teachers from prestigious music schools offering scholarships. The volume was overwhelming. The Ellen Show episode had also exploded online. The clip of Emily's performance was being shared across every social media platform, racking up millions of views within the first 24 hours. Comments poured in from around the world. I've been playing piano for 20 years and can't do what this 6-year-old just did. I'm crying. This is the most beautiful thing I've ever heard. This child is a genuine genius. We're watching history being made. My daughter watched this and immediately asked if she could learn piano. The response was overwhelmingly positive, with people from all walks of life being moved by Emily's performance and charmed by her personality. Of course, there were a few skeptical comments, people who couldn't believe a 6-year-old could really be that talented, but they were drowned out by the tsunami of support and admiration. Emily's school life became a bit complicated. Suddenly, all the other kids knew that Emily had been on TV. Some of them had watched with their families. At recess, kids crowded around her, asking questions, wanting to be her friend just because she was famous now. Emily handled it with remarkable grace for someone so young. She answered questions patiently, but also seemed a bit confused by all the fuss. "I'm the same as I was before," she told one classmate. "I just played piano on a TV show. It's not that big of a deal." But it was a big deal. The world had discovered Emily Baer, and they were fascinated. News outlets started running stories about her. Music magazines wanted interviews. Talk shows extended invitations for return appearances. Andrea and her husband had long conversations about how to handle this sudden fame. They established firm rules. Emily's education came first. Her happiness came first. She would only do interviews or performances when she wanted to, never under pressure. They would be selective about opportunities, choosing only those that felt right for Emily's development and well-being. "We need to make sure she still has a childhood," Andrea said firmly. "She needs time to just be a kid, not always be Emily Baer the prodigy." They also decided to get Emily a manager, someone who could help filter opportunities and handle the business side of things so the family could focus on being a family. They chose someone who had experience working with young talent but who also understood the importance of protecting childhood innocence. About 2 weeks after the Ellen episode aired, the family received a particularly special letter. It was from Quincy Jones, the legendary music producer who had worked with everyone from Michael Jackson to Frank Sinatra. He had seen Emily on Ellen and was deeply moved by her talent. He invited the family to Los Angeles again so he could meet Emily in person. "Who's Quincy Jones?" Emily asked when her parents told her about the letter. Her father pulled up some videos online, showing Emily some of the famous music Quincy had produced. Emily's eyes grew wide as she recognized song after song. "He made all these? Wow. He must really love music like I do." They made the trip to Los Angeles a few weeks later. Meeting Quincy Jones in his studio was an experience the family would never forget. The legendary producer, then in his 70s, sat at a piano with 6-year-old Emily and just talked to her about music. Not in a condescending way, not like an adult talking to a child, but like one musician talking to another. "Play me something you wrote recently," Quincy said. Emily played him a piece she'd composed just a few days earlier, inspired by watching birds outside her window. 6 months after Emily's appearance on Ellen, her family sat at the breakfast table sorting through a stack of invitations that had arrived in just that week alone. There were requests from symphony orchestras in Boston, New York, and Chicago. A famous jazz festival wanted her to perform. 2 different television shows wanted her back as a guest. A children's music education program wanted her to be their spokesperson. "This is getting to be too much," Andrea said, rubbing her temples. "I don't even know where to start." Emily was at the table too, eating cereal and swinging her legs under her chair, not particularly interested in the adult conversation about scheduling and opportunities. She had a new composition running through her head, and she was eager to finish breakfast so she could go play it on the piano. Their new manager, Patricia, had been a godsend. She was a woman in her 50s who had managed several child actors and musicians over the years. She understood the balance between nurturing talent and protecting childhood. She had already helped the family turn down dozens of opportunities that didn't feel right. "Remember," Patricia had told them during their first meeting, "just because someone wants Emily to do something doesn't mean she should. We get to be selective. We get to say no." That advice had been liberating. It gave the family permission to prioritize Emily's well-being over every exciting opportunity that came their way. Emily finished her cereal and slid down from her chair. "Can I go practice now?" "Of course, sweetheart," Andrea said, watching her daughter skip toward the living room. Within seconds, piano music filled the house. It was a sound Andrea had grown so accustomed to that the house felt wrong on the rare occasions when the piano was silent. The piece Emily was working on today was different from her usual style. It had jazz influences, something she'd been experimenting with after meeting a jazz pianist at one of her recent performances. Emily's musical mind was like a sponge, absorbing new styles and techniques and immediately finding ways to incorporate them into her own work. Later that week, Emily performed at a fundraiser for a children's hospital. This was the type of opportunity the family felt good about. Not for fame or money, but to use Emily's gift to help others and bring joy to kids who were going through difficult times. The performance was in the hospital's main auditorium. The audience was filled with doctors, nurses, donors, and some patients who were well enough to attend. Emily played several of her own compositions, each one receiving enthusiastic applause. But the most meaningful part of the evening came afterward. Emily visited some of the children who couldn't leave their hospital rooms. She brought a small keyboard with her, rolling it from room to room on a cart. In one room, she met a girl named Katie who was about Emily's age. Katie had been in the hospital for months with a serious illness, and she looked tired and sad. Emily sat on the edge of Katie's bed and just started playing soft, gentle music. "Do you like it?" Emily asked after playing for a few minutes. Katie nodded, a small smile appearing on her face for the first time in days, according to her mother who stood in the doorway wiping tears from her eyes. "I can teach you something easy if you want," Emily offered. She showed Katie a simple melody on the keyboard, helping guide her fingers to the right keys. Katie's face lit up as she managed to play the little tune Emily had taught her. "I played music," Katie said, looking at her mother with excitement. Emily smiled. "You did great. Music makes everything feel better, I think." This was the side of Emily that her parents loved most. Yes, she was extraordinarily talented. Yes, she was becoming famous. But she was also kind and empathetic, wanting to share her gift in ways that helped others feel better. As Emily's 7th birthday approached, her parents reflected on the journey they'd been on over the past year. Since the Ellen appearance, Emily had performed at Carnegie Hall twice more, had been featured in major music magazines, and had even started recording her first album of original compositions. But she had also lost her first tooth, learned to ride a two-wheeler bike, and made the honor roll at school. She was living a double life in a way, part child prodigy and part normal kid, and somehow she was managing to balance both. For her birthday party, Emily wanted something simple. Just her school friends, cake, and games in the backyard. No cameras, no press, no music industry people. Just a regular 7-year-old birthday party. Andrea made it happen, determined to give Emily pockets of normalcy whenever possible. The party was perfect. Emily played tag with her friends, got frosting all over her face eating cake, and laughed until her stomach hurt when someone told a silly joke. The piano in the house stayed silent that afternoon, and that was exactly how it should be. But a few days after her birthday, Emily asked her parents if they could talk about something important. She sat them down on the couch with a serious expression that looked funny on her 7-year-old face. "I've been thinking," she said carefully, "and I want to do more with my music. I love playing at home and for small groups, but I think I want to perform more. I want more people to hear my songs." Andrea and her husband exchanged glances. "Are you sure, sweetie? We don't want you to feel pressured. You don't have to perform if you don't want to." "I know," Emily said, "but I want to. Music is my favorite thing, and playing for people makes me happy. When I see people smiling or crying because they like my music, it makes me feel good inside." This conversation led to more performances over the following months. Emily played at prestigious venues around the country. She appeared on several more television shows. She even performed at the White House for a special event, shaking hands with the President and First Lady, who both told her how impressed they were by her talent. Each performance brought new fans and more recognition. Music teachers showed videos of Emily to their students as inspiration. Young pianists around the world tried to learn Emily's compositions. She was becoming not just famous but influential, showing other kids that extraordinary achievement was possible at any age. But the attention wasn't always easy. Sometimes other kids at school were jealous or made mean comments. Some parents in their community gossiped about Andrea and her husband, suggesting they were pushing Emily too hard or exploiting her talent. These criticisms hurt, especially because they weren't true. Emily's parents constantly worried about whether they were doing right by their daughter, second-guessing every decision, always trying to find the balance between supporting her gift and protecting her childhood. One difficult day, after Emily had come home from school upset because some classmates had teased her about being different, Andrea found her daughter sitting at the piano, playing a piece that sounded unusually melancholy. "Want to talk about it?" Andrea asked gently, sitting down next to Emily on the piano bench. Emily kept playing as she talked. "Sometimes I wish I was just regular, that I didn't have all this attention, that kids at school would just treat me normal." Andrea's heart ached. "Do you want to stop performing? We can just keep music as something you do at home for fun." Emily stopped playing and looked at her mother. "No, I don't want to stop. I love performing and I love my music. I just wish people wouldn't make such a big deal about it sometimes. I'm still just me. You are just you," Andrea said, pulling Emily into a hug. "And you're perfect exactly as you are. Both the part of you that plays piano amazingly and the part of you that likes cartoons and ice cream." As the year continued, Emily's music evolved and matured. She started incorporating more complex harmonies and rhythms into her compositions. She began experimenting with different genres, creating pieces that blended classical, jazz, pop, and even electronic elements. Music critics who reviewed her work were consistently amazed. One reviewer wrote, "Emily Baer's compositions show a sophistication that defies her age. She understands music theory, emotional expression, and artistic storytelling at a level that most adult composers struggle to achieve. We are truly watching the development of a master musician." But perhaps the most significant development came when Emily started teaching. A local music school asked if she would be willing to work with some of their younger students, kids who were just starting to learn piano. Emily loved the idea. Once a week, Emily would spend an hour at the music school, sitting with beginners and helping them learn. She was patient and encouraging, remembering what it was like to be just starting out, even though for her that felt like ancient history. "Don't worry if you make mistakes," she would tell her students. "Mistakes are how you learn. Just keep playing and have fun with it." The kids she taught adored her. Having a teacher who was only a few years older than them made music feel more accessible, less intimidating. They could see that kids could be great at music, not just adults. One of her students, a shy 8-year-old boy named Tommy, had been struggling with confidence. He wanted to quit piano because he didn't think he was good enough, but after a few lessons with Emily, something changed. "Emily makes mistakes sometimes too," Tommy told his mother. "She'll play something and then say, 'Oops, that wasn't quite right,' and then just try it again. It makes me feel like it's okay if I mess up." This was Emily's gift beyond her technical skill. She made music feel joyful and accessible. 5 years had passed since Emily's first appearance on The Ellen Show, and the world had watched her grow from a 6-year-old prodigy into an 11-year-old musical force. But this story isn't just about those 5 years. It's about the ripple effect that one little girl's appearance on a television show created, touching lives in ways that nobody could have predicted. The Ellen Show clip of Emily's first performance became one of the most watched videos in the show's history. Over time, it accumulated tens of millions of views. But more importantly, it sparked something in people who watched it. Teachers around the world began showing the video in their classrooms, using Emily as an example of dedication and natural talent. "See what's possible when you find something you love?" they would tell their students. Music schools reported increases in enrollment after Emily's appearances became widely shared. Parents who had never considered music lessons for their children suddenly saw the value in exposing kids to instruments and creative expression. One mother in Ohio wrote a letter to Emily's family that Andrea kept in a special box. The letter read, "My daughter watched Emily on Ellen and asked if she could learn piano. We're not a musical family, and honestly, I thought it would be a phase. But 3 years later, my daughter practices every day. She's not a prodigy like Emily, but music has given her confidence and joy. Thank you for sharing your daughter's gift with the world." There were hundreds of letters like that, stories of children who were inspired, adults who were moved to return to instruments they'd abandoned years ago, elderly people who said Emily's music brought them comfort during difficult times. Emily herself continued to grow and evolve as a musician. By age 11, she had composed over 1,000 original pieces. She had released 3 albums of her work, She had performed with major symphony orchestras and collaborated with famous musicians from various genres. But perhaps more significantly, she had remained remarkably grounded and kind. Her parents' efforts to protect her childhood while nurturing her talent had paid off. Emily was confident but not arrogant, talented but not entitled. She understood that her gift was something special, but she also understood that it came with responsibility. "I think I'm supposed to share music with people," Emily once said in an interview when she was 10. "Not everyone can play piano, but everyone can enjoy listening to music. So maybe my job is to make music that helps people feel things or makes their day a little better." This philosophy guided her choices as she grew. She continued to perform at children's hospitals regularly, never charging a fee. She gave free piano lessons to kids from low-income families who couldn't afford private instruction. She created YouTube videos teaching basic piano concepts, wanting to make music education accessible to anyone with internet access. Her influence extended beyond music. Emily became a symbol of what young people could achieve when they pursued their passions with dedication and joy. Educators cited her as an example of intrinsic motivation and natural learning. Psychologists studied her development, fascinated by how someone so young could possess such emotional depth in their artistic expression. But Emily's story also started important conversations about prodigy culture and child development. Some people worried about the pressure placed on exceptional children. Others debated whether it was healthy for someone so young to be in the public eye. Andrea and her family were always transparent about their approach. In interviews, they talked openly about the boundaries they'd set, the sacrifices they'd made to keep Emily's life balanced, and the constant vigilance required to protect her well-being while supporting her talent. "We turn down way more opportunities than we accept," Andrea explained in one interview. Just because someone wants Emily to do something doesn't mean it's right for her. Her happiness and health come first always. This transparency helped other families who were dealing with exceptional children. Parents reached out asking for advice, and the Bear family was generous in sharing what they'd learned. As Emily entered her teenage years, her music began to take on new dimensions. She started scoring music for short films, discovering she had a talent for creating soundtracks that enhanced visual storytelling. This led to opportunities in the film industry, and eventually, she would go on to compose music for major motion pictures. The connection with Quincy Jones, which had begun when Emily was 6, developed into a meaningful mentorship. Quincy took Emily under his wing, introducing her to other legendary musicians and teaching her about the business side of the music industry. "This child has something that cannot be manufactured or taught," Quincy said in a documentary about Emily's life. "She has an innate understanding of music that is almost spiritual. My job isn't to teach her how to make music. It's to help her navigate the world so she can keep making music on her own terms." Emily's influence on other young musicians was profound. A whole generation of kids grew up watching her videos, seeing proof that age didn't have to be a barrier to excellence. Music competitions began seeing more young competitors, and the quality of youth performances across the country improved. Several professional pianists and composers who are now in their 20s have cited Emily as their initial inspiration. "I saw her on Ellen when I was 8, one concert pianist said. "I thought if she can do that, maybe I can do something special too." She made excellence feel possible. But the impact went beyond music. Teachers reported that students who watched Emily's story became more confident in pursuing their own unique interests, whether that was art, science, writing, or sports. Emily had shown that being different, being exceptional, being passionate about something was not just okay, but something to be celebrated. The Bear family's hometown of Rockford embraced Emily as a local hero. The city named a performing arts scholarship after her. The elementary school she had attended created a music program, inspired by her emphasis on creativity and joy in learning. As Emily grew older, she began to understand the full scope of what her early fame had meant. Looking back at videos of herself at 6 years old, she was amazed by how innocent and unaware she had been. "I had no idea that Ellen show appearance would change my life," Emily said in an interview on her 16th birthday. "I just thought I was going to play piano on TV and then come home and everything would be normal. I didn't understand that millions of people would see it, or that it would lead to all these other opportunities." But she was grateful for the opportunities, for the amazing people she'd met, for the chance to do what she loved as her career. I know I'm really lucky, Emily continued. Not everyone gets to make a living doing what they love most. Some kids with talents never get discovered or don't have families who can support them. I want to use my success to help create opportunities for other young musicians. And she did exactly that. By the time Emily was 15, she had established a foundation that provided free instruments and lessons to children in underserved communities. She personally donated pianos to schools that couldn't afford them. She funded scholarships for talented young musicians who needed financial help to pursue their education. The foundation organized concerts where young musicians could perform alongside established artists, giving them exposure and experience. Emily herself performed at these events whenever her schedule allowed, always making time to talk with the young performers and offer encouragement. Someone believed in me and gave me chances, Emily told the kids at these events. Now I want to do the same for you. Your age doesn't matter. Your background doesn't matter. If you love music and you're willing to work at it, you can do amazing things. Her story also had unexpected impacts in fields completely outside of music. Neurologists studied Emily's brain development, trying to understand how musical genius manifested at such a young age. Their research contributed to broader understanding of child development and learning. Educational theorists used Emily's story to support arguments for personalized learning and allowing children to pursue their passions deeply, rather than forcing all kids into the same educational mold. Psychologists studying happiness and fulfillment often pointed to Emily as an example of someone who had found their purpose early in life. Her genuine joy in playing music, even after years of professional performing, demonstrated how pursuing authentic passion could lead to lasting satisfaction. The original Ellen Show appearance continued to resurface and find new audiences. Parents showed it to their children. Teachers used it in lessons. It became one of those cultural moments that transcended its original context, becoming a symbol of possibility and wonder. Ellen herself remained close with Emily over the years, having her back on the show several times as she grew up. Their friendship was genuine, built on mutual respect and affection. Ellen watched with pride as the tiny 6-year-old she'd first welcomed onto her stage grew into a confident, accomplished young woman. I've had thousands of guests on my show over the years, Ellen said during one of Emily's later appearances. But Emily's first performance when she was 6 years old, that's still one of my favorite moments in the entire history of the show. Not just because of her talent, but because of her spirit. That hasn't changed. She's still that same joyful, genuine person,